What's up, guys? Void here, coming back at y'all with another video. This time we're going to be talking about the latest rule change involving Planeswalker damage being redirected by burn spells and similar effects. So if you're unsure about the official rulings, this was the case beforehand. They didn't change anything. They were just going to be specific about the actual text and wording on the cards themselves. This doesn't change the ruling at all. So if you were unsure about what it did before, whenever you would cast a spell such as Lightning Bolt here, or a Chain Lightning that can target a player, if you have a spell or ability that can deal damage to a player, you can also choose to redirect that damage to a Planeswalker if they have one. So what this does is essentially it gives Wizards of the Coast the ability to print new cards in their master sets, whether they want to errata them or just make brand new cards with the new text on it, in a very similar way that they did the whole rule change with colorless versus generic mana, which are very different things. I actually believe Desolator Magic did a pretty decent job of covering the differences. Believe it or not, he was actually the first one to report on this rule change on YouTube, from my knowledge. So say whatever you want about the guy, but hey, at least he's the first one to do it. And just in case you were wondering, this does not change the actual ruling on cards like Leyline of Sanctity, or anything like that that would change sort of the targeting of players or Planeswalkers. That doesn't work. If you were to play a card like this, you have hexproof. Planeswalkers you control don't have hexproof. You don't get to redirect any keywords like that. It's just damage redirection, and the ruling itself isn't changing at all. So I don't know why people are panicking. All they're doing is basically taking cards like Lightning Bolt, giving themselves an excuse to reprint it so they can put a brand new text on it, and they can have people freak out about buying brand new versions of cards because they think it's cool. That's about it. And I don't believe any cards are going to be exempt from this. I do believe it's pretty clear and cut the difference between dealing damage to players or dealing damage to creatures. Usually, I mean, you could tell anything that can deal damage to a player is usually going to redirect to a Planeswalker anyway. But it is very interesting that they're deciding to do this now. And really though, Planeswalkers have started all this confusion ever since they've been released back in Lorwyn. They're so different though. They're Planeswalkers, but yet technically, according to the lore, the players, we are actually considered Planeswalkers. I guess if you're into all the pageantry and bullshit of the actual game, you dress up like your favorite Planeswalker, you're technically the Planeswalker too. It's very confusing when it says, oh, target player. Well, are you referring to Planeswalkers or players? So, at least for me, it was always a little weird going into it from that stance, especially when you learn how to play the game. They teach you that you're Planeswalkers technically, so then they make a card type called Planeswalker, and then you just kind of mind blown. Well, are we technically considered Planeswalkers? I don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, the whole damage redirect BS, that's always been a problem for people. They don't understand. I always have questions. I've had many of these questions as well. Hey, is this something I can redirect to a Planeswalker? Because it doesn't actually say it on the card. So now that they're actually going to errata cards now to say that they can be redirected to Planeswalkers instead of just players, that's very good. This also means though that future brand new burn spells that they make are also going to have this distinction, which I can only imagine that they would have that distinction anyway, because first of all, Planeswalkers are extremely busted in limited, Planeswalkers are extremely busted in standard. So if you can at any way, shape, or form add to the removal for Planeswalkers, burn is pretty effective of dealing with Planeswalkers usually. So if you can improve the efficiency, make it to where we have more burn spells in standard, if not to play burn decks in standard, at least to effectively remove and deal with Planeswalkers, that would be good. And it's obviously helpful because new players, you have to understand, a lot of new players are going to enter this game, especially if Arena is a success. You want them to know the rulings instead of having all these questions. All you really need to do is just read the card. And honestly, all these unspoken rules, that's probably the biggest part of this game that really just frustrates new players because they don't know. I mean, if they read a card that's like from 1994 and they wonder, well, how come this is so old and how come it doesn't have the newer text on it? Well, because it's an old card, and this was way before they decided to errata it eventually. So, yeah, giving everything in Oracle text online, everything, yeah, it's easy to get away with it if you're playing online. You don't have to worry about these things, but actually playing the paper version of the game, it's very difficult, especially if you do play a lot of those older cards, and a lot of older cards from Legends, Arabian Nights. A lot of those older cards just don't have the best wordings on it. They have the old school wordings. So you have to get the newer versions of cards if you want to avoid those confusions, especially dealing with new players, which primarily, I don't know if you know this by now, but I play Commander. A lot of new players play Commander. They buy pre-constructed decks, they sit down, and they pick up cards, they wonder what things do, and the best way to do that is by reading the cards for themselves. That way they pick up an understanding of what it does, and when it has a complete BS, unspoken rule about it, it's very difficult. But anyway, I think it's definitely a good thing. Desolator Magic kind of panicked there. I don't know. It's not that big of a deal. They've already decided they were going to reprint a bunch of shit anyway. They're going to make 2 master sets a year now. I don't really care. This is actually going to be a decent reason to get new cards because it avoids confusion. But then again, it is just another way for them to make money too. So I can understand where he's coming from. But anyway, guys, those are just my 2 cents on the topic. You'll have a wonderful day. Void here, signing off.